This is Dr. Cesar Oliva with another episode of the Way to College podcast. And if you tuned in to the last episode, you've got to hear the first part of my conversation with Ken Miller. And Ken is an author, speaker, does many things as we found out through the podcast. But one thing that I think where we left off was talking about the work that he's doing today. And so we'll get into that work and why he does this work and talk about his book. So Ken, thank you for coming back.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back.
Ken, I'd like to start, we don't have to start sort of I think chronologically, but
Mhm.
tell us about the work that you're doing with men. Because you talked a little bit about that, but I wanted to go back and explore that a little more.
So the work that I do is, keep it real simple, is I mentor men.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people use that term, but what does it mean to explicitly mentor another man or woman? I choose to only mentor men. That's of my choice. And I predominantly mentor men of color. That's, again, of my choice. Been doing it for 15 years. I teach on mentorship. I do workshops on mentorship, but I also do it. And I have 12 men that I mentor today. I've been up to 28 men at one time that are mentor, and they're all over the country in any age between probably 23 and 55. And so that's what I do in the mentorship area. And there's a few other areas that I work with men outside of mentorship.
Ken, why is it so important for you to offer this mentorship to these men?
Because there's an observation that I made many years ago, decades ago, that without learned counsel or an individual that you trust that has your best interest at heart, but also has the experience, the knowledge, the gravitas, the ability to express to you maybe a different avenue to go down or to co-sign. And that's so much of what I do is co-sign on right behavior or right actions. And I think that's important to understand what that means. And it means very simply is that we need affirmations because we have all this information going through our brain. Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I date her? Should I not date her? Should I take this job opportunity? Should I not take this? Should I go to this interview? Which should I say? Da da da. And most of the time, we can come up with the best alternative, the best decision, best opportunity. But we need someone to co-sign, to affirm that because we're not sure, because we've made a lot of bad decisions in our lives. Everybody has. We
Mhm.
all have. And mine might have been a little worse in that they put me in prison or they hurt others or they hurt me. Okay, that's cool. But it's still a decision. And so many times we just need affirmation that our thinking is good. And then the other one is that we need alternatives. We need a path. What would you do in this situation? Or this is my problem. What do you suggest I do? Because it's always a suggestion. That's what I do. And I tell them that. What I suggest you do is this. Or I'll say very simply, hey, I think you're doing the right thing. I think that's the right path to go down. That's the right decision. I want to tell you, I applaud that. I honor that decision. And what I'm doing is co signing and affirming your decision that you've made.
Ken, tell me about what role did mentorship or lack of mentorship play in your own life?
Well, I can tell you about lack. So I was in college or I was in my 20s, and I did not have a Black male role model slash mentor. A role model could be an individual in the common realm, an individual in social media or a celebrity. That can be a role model, but I'm talking about a mentor where there's two-way discourse. That's a key component of being a mentor. is that there's communication going both directions. Okay, I can have a role model. I'll give you an example. A role model is Winston Churchill for me. I think he was just a phenomenal human being and also his ability to talk. A role model, I don't know, Roma. I was going to say James Baldwin. I love the way he writes. Okay.
Mhm.
But going back in my 20s, I did not have role models. And more important, I didn't have a mentor that I could throw opportunities, I could throw decisions by. And therefore, I just went by my immaturity
Mhm.
and made decisions based on what I believe was going to cause me the least amount of pain or bring me the most amount of pleasure. And I made those decisions. Okay. And so that's with the lack of a mentor. And then when I began being mentored, so I'm mentored right now. I have mentors who are in their 70s, men that I respect their journey. I respect their decision-making capabilities. And they've been great mentors. And I've had them for 15 and let's say 10, 12 years. I have two of them that I can name right now, Jim Posey and Alphonse Brown Jr.
You know, Ken, I applaud the work that you're doing, and that you're not only mentoring these young men, but then you're also, or these men, right? Because you said 23 to 55, so
Mhm.
variety, right? But then
Mhm.
that you yourself, you talk about the role that mentors have played and currently play in your life. I, as a college instructor, I find, and it feels like more so today, I think a lot of young men struggling to identify and find a role model, find a, not a role model, I'm sorry, excuse me, to find a mentor.
Mhm.
What advice would you give a young person who, is in college, in the early
Mhm.
20s, but they're
Mhm.
looking for somebody to mentor. They're looking for that, as you say, somebody to co-sign on some of those decisions and give them some advice and guidance.
Yeah, co-sign on the good ones because you can go to your partners, your homeboys, the guys in the dorm and get somebody to co-sign on bad behavior. That's not hard to do, especially at your age. I'm talking to the college age, early 20s or 20s, people that are young in their career. So first of all, you have to make a determination, do I want a mentor? Is my ego small enough to allow another individual to assist and support me in my journey? And that's your ego. That's your ego speaking. Because your ego will say, I'm 21, I'm 19, I know everything. You don't, bro. You don't. Listen to me. You don't. You haven't had enough experience in the adult world to understand sometimes the ramifications of the decisions we make and or the different opportunities that are available there depending on what decisions that you make. You haven't been an adult long enough. Believe me on this one. Okay. And then most of the time you haven't had or walked through the experience that then can give you an ability to communicate back to someone a path, a correct path. So, first of all, we started with that. Number one, I want a mentor. That's the first thing you have to say to yourself. I'm willing and open to trusting, because it comes down a lot of times to trust an individual. Second thing, you say, okay, I'm willing to do that. Number two, how do I find one? And that's for a lot of them, that can be difficult because you don't know where to look and or you may not have exposure to individuals that could be a good mentor. Okay. So usually when we go into the work environment, we look around to other individuals that are in a position within your company or within your field that could be a good mentor. And I'm pro for that. My thing is get the mentor first, get one and learn how to be a mentee. And there is how to be a mentee. And then, but if you're in college, a lot of times you can't go to your professor and ask them to be your mentor. That's not the way that relationship works. Usually, you can ask for a coach. Can you coach me
Hmm.
on, molecular biology? Okay, great. Can you, provide information as I, apply for this Fulbright or Truman Scholarship? Cool. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. But to be a mentor, and I'm talking about it breaks down that relationship between the student and the professor and or teacher or instructor. And a lot of times legally, we don't want to do that from an
Hmm.
HR perspective. Again, I'm speaking from experience here. Okay, so now we got to find a mentor. And one of the things that I always say is look at whatever associations or verticals that you may or may not belong to. And then look for individuals and what you're trying to do is find individuals that you respect their walk. And what does that mean, respect their walk? That means the way that they handle themselves in meetings, the way that they handle themselves at the sporting event, the way that they handle themselves in this cultural experience. Do they seem like they're at ease with life? And I'm not talking ego or hubris. Are they at ease? That's something. So you understand, most of the people that I've mentored, they've come to me. Would you be my mentor? Or I've had a family member say, would you mentor this young man or my husband? I got one right now who's a doctor. I know his wife through the speaking world, and she asked me if I would mentor, at least meet with him and see if he'd be open. And I said, sure, let's talk. And now I mentor, and this gentleman has a doctorate. He's in higher ed. You see what I'm saying? So again, and then the thing is, then you have to meet with that individual on the phone because all my people are online, offline. Yeah, offline. I meet them digitally now. I used to meet them physically in Anchorage, Alaska, when I mentored just people in Anchorage. My people all over the country. And I think I even have one in New Zealand. I have to look on my list. But the key thing is then you sit down and say, hey, I'm looking to be mentored. Are you open or willing, to mentor me? That's call and ask. And it's one of the greatest skills that you can learn as a human is how to ask and to get comfortable on asking people for assistance or support or help.
I find that one, thank you,
Mm.
and thank you for breaking it down. I think getting into the weeds a bit and talking
Mhm.
about who to ask, where to look. But really, you're right. That ask, right, is it is a skill, and it's not something that comes easy. Asking for help, asking for support, being a vulnerable. Because I think when you're asking somebody to mentor you, when you're asking for help, it does require a little bit of vulnerability.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
so, Dia, thank you for pointing that out. How did you land on 12 men? Is that like I'll see 12 men because I imagine you must get asked a lot. You get around and get to speaking and yeah, how did you land on 12?
So I get asked a lot. So first of all, I don't mentor women. So that's
Hmm.
half the population that it's easy for me to say no.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's so many great because you brought up something in mind, and I don't want to go off the subject too much, Jose. I was trying to think of skills to acquire while you're in college that will avail you throughout your life.
Hmm.
Okay. So, number one is learn how to self audit and self reflect. You
Hmm.
have to be able to see your truth. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my secrets? That's number one. Number two, you need to learn how to ask. We just talked about that one, how to make the ask. You're going to need to know it to get married. You're going to need to know it to get a mentor and sometimes to get a date. Sometimes you don't even have to ask. Okay. But that's a whole nother subject. Number three, real important is for those that really want to, I believe, be successful, you have to learn how to publicly speak. and to get comfortable with public speaking. But that's can be a few years. You can start doing that in your 20s, Toastmasters, National Speakers Association, whatever. Okay. And then the fourth one, which is one of the toughest. This is probably a couple more I'll think of while I'm sitting here, but it's the first time I've gone down this path, is you have to learn how to say no.
Mm.
You have to learn how to say no, because every time you say yes, you're saying no to something else. But that's on the back end because you only have a certain capacity of time. So you have to learn how to say no. Okay. So let's go back to your original question, why 12? July of 2024, I had 53 volunteer commitments. I was on 23 boards. I had 28 men that I mentored, and I had one man that I sponsored in the anonymous programs. And it was too much. It was too much. I track all my hours. And at the most I had was doing over 1,060 hours. I did 1 year. There's only 2,080 hours in a year of work, 8 hour
Yeah.
work days.
Yeah.
So I spent more time volunteering than I did working, way more. Anyway, it was too much. It's pulling me, especially being on all these different committees and boards. And so I put my resignation into all the boards after speaking to my mentor. And then I went from 28 men that I mentored to 10. And I spoke to each and every individual because I'm mentoring them. And I had told them at one point that it would always be open ended, that until you fired me. But I had to go down to them and look them in the eye and say, this is why I'm doing this.
Hmm.
And I just want to let you know I need to do this. And every single one of them was so glad for me because people didn't know I was doing 52 volunteer. I don't tell
Yeah.
one board I'm on another board or I'm on this subcommittee or on this task force or leading this task force. I don't tell them that. But my wife knew, I knew. And so, I had all the stressors of volunteer commitments. So I took it down to 10. And then, like 2, 3 months later, I'm getting these guys call me like, hey, when are we meeting? And I'm like, I thought we had broken up. I thought we stopped dating. And and I'm being facetious. And I was like, if you got enough, gumption to call me, I'll just put you back on the list. So that got me 12. And then I picked up one more. So it's 12 or 13, but I think it's 12. I
Yeah.
picked up one other gentleman. And it was interesting because he's white. And I don't usually work, with white guys. I don't mentor him because I know the need in my community. Again, my choice. But his story was so unique and where he was at was so, and he called me up. He found me, he had gone on one of my podcasts or he read my book or something. And
Hmm.
so I said, let's do it. Let's do it. Because I had to look at myself too.
Yeah.
If you're talking about being quote unquote biased, now I'm still very, very comfortable with saying no to women. No problem with that whatsoever. I have experience in trying to mentor a woman,
Hmm.
and it did not work out the way that was respectful to my marriage and didn't work out. It was respectable to what I had told the person in the beginning. And
Hmm.
so, why my wife doesn't have to worry about me at
Yeah.
7 o'clock in the evening on an hour call talking to some woman about her relationships
Yeah.
or whatever. You don't have to worry about that because I don't do that. So that's my choice. But I did look
Okay.
at the black white thing, and doesn't mean I'm going to start mentoring white guys now,
Yeah.
because I'm good. I'm at capacity, and I've
Yeah.
had to say no. I said I can't do it. But why don't you look here? Why don't you reach out? Because I have black men that are
Hmm.
willing to mentor. They just need mentees.
Mm. You know, one, thank you for the work, for that work that you're doing, because I think we've established how critical it is and how important it
Mhm.
is. Um, for men everywhere. I mean, I think it's
Hmm.
important that everybody have a mentor, right? But for men, particularly men of color, absolutely. Um, and thank you for this list. I love this list about the self-auditing, the learning to ask, the getting comfortable with the public speaking. So, and then of course the learning to say no. I'm sure for our listeners and our viewers out there, when they hear this, I think all of them will resonate with them, but as I think about my college students, for so many of them, they struggle to say no. And not that they overcommit themselves, but overcommit themselves enough so that it is pulling away from their studies or other things, important things in their lives that are helping them to grow and prosper, I think. So thank you for breaking it down for us like this. Ken, I want to get back to this idea of being vulnerable. And
Hmm.
so you've written your book. Your book is called Becoming Ken. We see it here on the screen. Tell us about when did you when did you get the courage to tell your story?
When when I was in prison and I told it to the counselor, when I started talking about my secret or secrets. So when that's the first example of courage in that realm. Are you talking
Hmm.
about being vulnerable? So what does that mean? We were talking about this. I have another thing I do, which is a Black men's book study. So we read nonfiction books. We're doing Cry Like a Man by Wilson, phenomenal book. And we were talking about vulnerability. And I was like, what does that mean? And we talked about that. We talk about words.
Hmm.
And to be vulnerable, what it means is an openness to accept a possibility of emotional pain. That's where I'm talking about vulnerable in the emotional sense, because it's
Hmm.
vulnerable in the physical sense.
Yeah.
Go into battle and they got swords, and you have nothing,
Hmm.
or you're naked.
Hmm.
That's vulnerable. A lot of times we call nakedness vulnerability.
Hmm.
Okay. But I'm talking about in the emotional sense. I have a willingness and an openness to absorb or be accepting of emotional pain. That's what vulnerability is. Because what'll happen is you'll get feedback from the audience, feedback from the individual, feedback from the partner, feedback from the wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. And that feedback will make you feel less than. The feedback will make you feel not valuable. The feedback will make you and confirm your self talk that says that I have no value or my value is less than others. That is what we're being vulnerable to,
Hmm.
emotional pain. Or you'll open the door, or you'll be vulnerable, and that person will bring you back to a time that has a physical emotion connected to the time. Okay. The time that I was sexually assaulted, the time that I was beat up, the time my father left the family. And I have a feeling about that time. I stop at the feeling. It's not a cognitive, it's a feeling. I used to have feelings connected with past thoughts, past memories. There was a feeling. I
Hmm.
would stop at the feeling and just be in the feeling and then try to run away from the feeling or try to defer or, try to go somewhere else in my mind so I don't have that feeling because I don't like that feeling of fear. I don't like that feeling of anger. I don't like that feeling of rejection or abandonment. I don't like that feeling. So therefore, I have to change the memory. I have to change what I'm thinking consciously in the now.
Hmm. And I appreciate that you I think it's one thing to share your story with your counselor, right? As you said, you're in prison, you're
Mm-hmm.
sharing with a counselor, but then to decide I want to write this book
Mm-hmm.
because I need to write this book. Ken, who is this book for?
Number one, it was for me.
Mhm.
Did I have the courage to put it on paper? Did I have the courage to go on stage and speak to this? You're talking about being vulnerable because people can react in certain ways. Some people are
Mhm.
not comfortable with some of the actions that I've done. Understandable. I'm not comfortable with some of the actions I did.
Mhm.
I still have guilt. I have no problem with guilt. That's not shame based. It's a difference.
Mhm.
Okay. So I wrote it for me, but I honestly hope to say I wrote it for the readers. I, I got a meeting tomorrow with someone that's a producer who read the book and wants to
Mhm.
talk to me about doing something with the book. I'm like, cool. That's not why I wrote it.
Yeah.
But if I can touch more people and let them know that I've gone to this level, I'm not at this level today, I'm not that person, you too can overcome it. You too can come back from the setback. You too are valuable. You too are a child of God. You too have the capacity to get well. That's probably the biggest thing I want to always say to people. You can get well. And there is wellness. I'm
Mhm.
well. Jose, we
Mhm.
talked about this before. I'm well.
Yeah.
And you see how far I went down? Okay. So that's who I wrote it for. I wrote it for me,
Yeah.
but I'd like to say predominantly I wrote it for others.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. Ken, uh, you do so much. You do so many different things, right? You've got the group that you're mentoring. You've got
Mhm.
your reading group with
Mhm.
the other Black men.
Mhm.
You still serving on boards?
No. Remember,
Oh,
I went
quit
off,
all.
I resigned
Mhm.
gracefully, respectfully, communicated to each other my why. And then it was like one or two. It took me a couple months to
Mhm.
go off for different reasons, but
Yeah,
all the other ones, I put in. You can resign. I'm a volunteer,
yeah,
and so I resigned. And people again were so understanding,
yeah,
and I know there were people who wish they could do it or they had the courage because it took courage for me to do it. What are people
yeah,
going to think about me? They're not going to like me as much.
yeah,
They're going to reject me because remember, those are my core issue is abandonment.
yeah.
My core issue is I was going to die alone. That's my core issue. Is that since I was a foster child, I was going to die alone. I knew I wasn't wanted since I was born. That's what I internalized. It's not truth, but that's what I internalized. So now I'm doing something that's going to give people reason to reject me or abandon people. It's been super cool. Very, very
And and
cool.
congratulations on everything,
Mhm.
and particularly on your journey. It is well, I mean, I think everybody that listens to the episode, and um, I think they're going to enjoy it. I think find a lot of inspiration from you and from your story. And so thank you again for sharing that with us. Ken, as we transition out, what final piece of advice would you like to leave with our listeners and viewers out there?
Oh, it's always the final piece of advice. You know, there's so much advice that I can give an individual. Many of them is going to be very specific to the individual because I treat all my mentees, for example. Originally, I thought I'd give everybody the same advice. And I realized people are in a um, they're in a unique place in their journey. I love the
Mm,
word journey. Okay. If I was to give one piece of advice, I, I would say seek truth and do the right thing. do the right thing. And I'm talking more in a spiritually, capital R, right thing. But seek truth. And it takes work because if you look at memes and cliches and YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, there's a lot of untruth there. How can you
Hmm.
say that? Well, because there's like six different opinions on the same thing.
Yeah.
So somebody's got to be right and somebody's got to be wrong, or there's gradients. But do the work to seek truth and start with yourself. Who are you really? Who are
Yeah.
you today? Do that self audit, and then do the next indicated correct thing. I call that God's will. Next indicated correct thing to do is God's will. Do God's will. A lot less friction in life. I'm not gonna say you won't, have pain because you will. I guarantee you, if you're living, you will have pain
Yeah.
and discomfort. I guarantee you that. How do you deal with that, though, is going to make it's not going to make or break you because a lot of times you don't get broken. You just get body blows. You get another cut. And you can have a death of 1,000 cuts, but you get another cut.
Yeah.
And let's minimize because you can truly minimize your pain. You can control environment. And that's one of the most important things you can do to minimize. And then every once in a while, stuff will still come. There's still people will pass away. Jobs will be lost, financial problems, problems in relationships. Yeah, that's going to happen. That's life. Okay. But let me put it this way. Ever since I stopped hanging out, in the streets or in the hood, I have a lot less problems now that I don't smoke crack cocaine. I have a lot less problems. Isn't that a coincidence? Boy, I can put two and two. That's causal. And I'm sorry I went a little long on that because I could, again, talk about this for about a half hour on, what's the next steps. So
Yeah.
again, thank you.
No, Ken, thank you. And I think absolutely. I think I love the self audit and seek truth. I love
Mhm,
that. Ken, thank you again
mhm.
for your time, for your story. And I think more importantly, thank you for the work that you're doing as you continue to mentor and inspire others and guide others along their own journey. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This concludes another episode of the Way to College podcast. Thank you to my guest, Ken Miller. Thank you to our listeners and viewers out there. And don't forget to share the podcast with one other person. I'd appreciate it. We'd all appreciate it. And we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.